Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at the learning theory as an explanation of attachment, which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of attachment. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Doland and Miller, 1950, behaviorists, proposed that caregiver-infant attachments can be explained by the learning theory also known as the cupboard love theory, where an infant learns to associate a caregiver with a feeling of pleasure when they are fed, classical conditioning, and an infant is reinforced in the behaviors that produce these desirable responses from a caregiver, operant conditioning. Therefore, children learn to love those who feed them. The learning theory suggests that in the case of caregiver-infant attachments, food serves as an unconditioned stimulus, UCS, to which a feeding infant has an unconditioned response, UCR, of pleasure. A caregiver starts as a neutral stimulus, NS, to which an infant has a neutral response, NR, of no response. When over time the same caregiver provides the infant with food, the caregiver starts to become associated with the food, until the infant views seeing the caregiver with the expectation that they will provide them with food, and the caregiver becomes a conditioned stimulus, CS, producing a conditioned response, CR, of pleasure. Through this process an attachment forms, where the caregiver becomes an attachment figure to the infant and the infant eventually learns to associate the caregiver with pleasure without the food needing to be present. The learning theory also suggests that this behavior from the infant is positively and negatively reinforced. When an infant is hungry they feel discomfort and pain and want to remove these unwanted feelings, so desire food, a primary reinforcer, something that naturally encourages behavior. They therefore cry, to which a caregiver responds with a comforting social suppressor behavior of feeding. The infant's behavior of crying is therefore positively reinforced, as they are rewarded with something pleasant, food. The infant's behavior of crying is also negatively reinforced, as the unpleasant feeling of being hungry is removed. Both of these increase the likelihood that the infant will repeat the crying behavior again. The child therefore displays proximity-seeking and attachment behavior with the caregiver as the caregiver becomes a secondary reinforcer, something that is associated with the primary reinforcer to encourage behavior, and a source of reward, food, and remover of unwanted feelings, hunger. The caregiver's behavior is also negatively reinforced. When the caregiver feeds the infant stops crying. The caregiver's behavior of feeding is therefore negatively reinforced, as the unpleasant sound of the infant crying is removed and the caregiver experiences parental relief. This increases the likelihood that the caregiver will repeat the feeding behavior again. This reinforcement is a two-way mutual process, which strengthens the attachment between caregiver and infant. The learning theory draws on the concept of drive reduction. Sears et al., 1957, suggested that hunger is a primary drive being an innate and biological motivator and attachment is a secondary drive learnt through the association between the caregiver and the satisfaction of the primary drive of hunger. Humans are motivated to eat in order to reduce the hunger drive, and therefore infants learn to associate the caregiver with the reduction and satisfaction of hunger. The learning theory has several strengths and limitations. A strength of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that it provides a plausible and scientific explanation of attachment formations. The learning theory is founded in an already established theory, as humans do learn from association and reinforcement. It is likely that there is an association between the provision of needs and the person providing those needs, leading to strong attachments. Furthermore, with the learning theory being based on behaviorism, it has supporting research. Pavlov demonstrated the process of classical conditioning in dogs and Skinner demonstrated the process of operant conditioning with mice and pigeons. This is a strength because it implies that the process of attachment formation is intricately tied to how individuals learn from their experiences and interactions, reinforcing the bond between meeting needs and developing strong emotional connections. With the empirical support from Pavlov and Skinner's research further solidifies the credibility of the learning theory in explaining the mechanisms underlying attachment in various settings. A limitation of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that it suggests that infants play a relatively passive role in the development of an attachment, simply responding to associations with comfort or reward. However, Feldman and Eidelman, 2007, found that babies take a very active role in the interactions that produce an attachment. This is a limitation because it suggests that the learning theory fails to fully capture the dynamic and active involvement of infants in the formation of their attachments, portraying them as passive recipients of conditioning rather than active participants in shaping their emotional bonds. A limitation of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that it takes a reductionist approach. The learning theory focuses on basic processes, with a stimulus and response link and reinforcement. This is too simplistic to explain complex attachment behaviors and ignores all cognitive processes emotions that influence attachment. This also cannot explain why attachment occurs, unlike Bowlby's monotropic attachment theory, which provides a more holistic explanation. Bowlby argued the advantages centered around protection and survival, which is more in line with our understanding of evolution. This is a limitation because it suggests that the learning theory's simplistic view, concentrating on stimulus-response connections and reinforcement, falls short in explaining the intricate attachment behaviors shaped by cognitive processes and emotions, unlike Bowlby's monotropic attachment theory, which offers a more holistic perspective rooted in evolutionary advantages related to protection and survival. A limitation of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that it is environmentally deterministic. The learning theory suggests that early learning determines later attachment behaviors. This perspective suggests that the environment, particularly the interactions and experiences a child has during infancy and early childhood, determines the attachment style they develop. According to this view, the quality of caregiver interactions, reinforcement of attachment behaviors, and exposure to specific stimuli play a significant role in forming the attachment bond. This deterministic approach implies that the environment is the primary factor influencing attachment outcomes, overlooking potential genetic predispositions or individual differences that may also contribute to attachment patterns. This is a limitation because it oversimplifies the complex nature of attachment formation by attributing it solely to environmental factors, neglecting the potential impact of genetic influences and individual differences. This deterministic view undermines the significance of other contributing factors in shaping attachment styles, potentially leading to an incomplete understanding of the multifaceted nature of attachment relationships. A limitation of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that it is contradicted by animal research. Lorenz's, 1935, conducted an animal study using geese and found that geese imprinted onto the first moving object they saw regardless of whether this object was associated with or giving them food. This suggests that attachments are not formed because of an association with food but instead because it is a biological innate drive. Harlow, 1958, conducted an animal study with baby monkeys and found that when baby monkeys were given the choice of a soft cloth-covered mother surrogate with no food and a wired mother surrogate with food, the baby monkeys chose and showed preference for the soft cloth-covered mother surrogate with no food, especially when the baby monkeys were stressed or scared. This suggests that attachment is not about food but instead contact comfort. As adults, many of the monkeys went on to struggle with forming a reproductive relationship and tended to be poor mothers themselves, showing how the lack of interaction from a caregiver causes maladjustment later in life. This could be argued by evolutionists such as Bowlby that shows how attachment may be innate and serve a purpose in future reproduction and relationships and not just a learned response. This is a limitation because it suggests that the learning theory's focus on environmental determinism overlooks the biological and innate aspects of attachment, as demonstrated by animal research studies conducted by Lorenz and Harlow. These studies indicate that attachments are not solely formed based on associations with food but also involve biological drives and the need for contact comfort. The findings from these animal studies highlight the importance of innate behaviors and emotional connections in attachment formation, challenging the learning theory's emphasis on learned responses and environmental influences. A limitation of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that it is contradicted by human research. Schaefer and Emerson, 1964, found that the majority of infants tended to form their primary attachment with their mothers, who was most responsive to the infant's needs, regardless of whether she was the one who fed them, and therefore an infant's primary attachment figure is not always the person who feeds them. They also found that 39% of the infants were not attached to the person primarily involved in their physical care. This is a limitation because it suggests that the learning theory's focus on food as the primary driver of attachment is contradicted by human research, as shown in the study by Schaefer and Emerson, 1964. Their findings indicate that infants form their primary attachment with individuals who are most responsive to their needs, not necessarily the ones who provide food. This challenges the notion that feeding alone is the key factor in forming attachments, highlighting the importance of emotional responsiveness and care in attachment relationships. A limitation of the learning theory as an explanation of attachment is that there is an alternative explanation. Hay and Vespo, 1988, took a social learning theory approach and suggested that parents teach their children to love them through role modeling, by demonstrating attachment behaviors, where an infant copies the behavior of their caregiver, who they admire, when they see them receive a reward for that behavior. For example, when their caregiver gives someone a hug, they receive a hug back. Parents may also directly instruct their children to show attachment behaviors, e.g., give me a hug now, and a parent might socially facilitate a conversion with their child, where they talk their behavior through, e.g., parent might explain to their child how another child might feel if they don't share their toys with them. Parents also reinforce loving behavior by showing approval when infants display their own attachment behaviors, e.g., giving attention to or cuddling their parents. This is a limitation because it suggests that the learning theory's focus on environmental determinism is challenged by the social learning theory approach proposed by Hay and Vespo, 1988. Their perspective highlights the active role of parents in teaching and shaping attachment behaviors through modeling, instruction, and reinforcement, suggesting a more interactive and socially influenced process in attachment formation. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.